I just slowly, bit by bit, entirely lost myself. I was insecure, I was extremely anxious in my job, I was piling stress upon myself and just living under this like weight on my shoulders and this crunching in my stomach. I went from being a person that was needy and insecure and expected my boyfriend to read my mind and know what he had to do to make me feel okay, to someone who just knows that I'm okay no matter what, and then have the pleasure of a nice relationship 90-something% of the time. As Anne said, I'm Bec Sheffield. I live in North Devon and I've lived here for 1 week short of a year. It was in a week's time, it'll be a year since I moved here. I'm originally from the Midlands, in the middle of the UK. For most of my life, I belonged to a church community. I absolutely loved it for the most part. It was like just having a massive extended family. And I kind of made a commitment to that church community and was hugely involved. My work was in the church, my social life was in the church, my friendships and relationships, everything was about the church for me. And what kind of happened was from the point where I made my initial commitment to be a part of the church to the point where I left, which is 5 years ago now, over the period of that time, I just slowly, bit by bit, entirely lost myself. I was insecure, I was extremely anxious in my job, I was piling stress upon myself and just living under this like weight on my shoulders and this crunching in my stomach. And it wasn't an instant thing, it was a gradual thing. And for me, that's what stress and anxiety is. It's not something, we don't just wake up one day and go, oh my gosh, I'm living under an anxious cloud. It happens bit by bit. And it's only when we look back and go, oh yeah, 6 months ago, I wasn't feeling this, I wasn't in this space. And we don't always notice it creeping up. So I was kind of, committed to church. I went 2 or 3 times a week. I worked with people in the church, and just slowly, bit by bit, I started to notice that I was more and more anxious. And I never used to be. That wasn't my experience of life, growing up and stuff. I wasn't an anxious person. I was quite a confident person. I made friends easily, those kinds of things. But what I noticed over a period of maybe about 2 or 3 years, that bit by bit I was becoming more stressed, more anxious. I didn't eat a lot. People commented on the fact that I'd lost loads of weight, and that kind of thing. And I didn't sleep very well. It took me 2 or 3 hours from leaving work to kind of winding down and feeling comfortable enough to go to sleep. I was constantly on edge, like what's coming next, what's going to happen here, and not being able to, when you're kind of on alert all the time, nothing you do is of a very good quality because you're in this high alert state. Everything's raring to go in case something comes at you. And so nothing you kind of come to, you don't come to it with a clear mind. And so anything I was doing just wasn't good quality. I wasn't coming at it able to produce good work. And one of the things I was only talking about this a couple of weeks ago with some people I was working with. I used to have this massive long to-do list, like huge to-do list. I actually found it the other day because I was explaining how long it was. And I was like, see, I told you, it was humongous. And all I did all day was move things around on my to-do list. I never actually did any of the things on there because I was so caught up in my head about how everything was my responsibility. And the person I worked for, if I didn't look after her and make sure she got to appointments on time, and if I didn't make sure she had income, I took all of that on. So I had the responsibility of the person I was working for, myself, the clients that we were working with, all my friends at the church, just everything felt like it was my responsibility. And so I sat in front of my to-do list every day for sort of 6 or 7 hours, just moving things around. Oh, I'll do that later. Oh, I'll do that tomorrow. Oh, that belongs in that list. Oh, that can go to that, that. And that's all I actually achieved every day, which isn't much of an achievement. And that was because of what was going through my head and the kind of clouds and the thoughts that were in my head at the time. And so what kind of happened for me was, after about sort of 2 or 3 years of this gradually stepping up, I effectively had a bit of a meltdown. And it was very fortunate for me at the time that Deb's my auntie and also the person that I work with, and she's going to do one of these webinars soon, so look out for her. I watched her over the last few years change massively in her life. I mean, her story is incredible. I won't spoil it. I'll let her tell you that. But I'd watched massive changes for her. And so when all this was going on for me, there was a tiny little voice in the back of my head saying, you need to have a word with Auntie Deb. You need to speak to Auntie Deb. And after maybe 4 or 5 months of sort of knowing I needed to do that, there was a day where, as these things often happen, everything kind of exploded in one big mess right in front of me. And I found myself on the floor in my office, my work office, in tears on the phone. Deb, I need to speak to you. And in Deb's very calm manner, absolutely fine, Bec. She lived in Devon at the time. I lived in Coventry. Just get on a train, come here, we'll take it from there. And I haven't looked back since. So that was kind of where I got to, this kind of meltdown stage, and I was living in anxiety. I was living in high stress. I wasn't doing well. And that was kind of the point where I kind of got to in terms of a bit of a meltdown. I kind of got to this meltdown point. And as I said, I'd seen my auntie change massively, and her story is around kind of a very unhealthy relationship. And I'd seen that change for her, and I'd seen her leave that relationship and just change from this shell of a person to an incredible, confident woman. And so I kind of had seen that and went, right, Deb's the person I need to speak to in this mess that I'm in. And so I started spending time with Deb. I came down to Devon and spent time with her. We had Zoom chats like this every week, and she started sharing with me an understanding of how life really works, which started putting a really interesting view on what had gone on for me over the last few years. And just masses of things shifted for me, not just around the anxiety I'd lived in through those few years, but around relationships, around my friendships. Just all sorts of stuff had happened, that I suddenly just started to see really differently. So that's kind of my background and what happened. So I thought maybe the next thing would be to just share what it is I see now around life and kind of stress and anxiety and that sort of thing.
People are obviously going to want to know, so what happened? What changed? What was it that Deb shared with you, and how did that change? So I presume that's what you're going to go on to. That would be great.
Yes. So I love the fact that you've called this the secret of everything, because it often feels when we're having these conversations like we are hiding a secret, which is never intentional. But it's what we talk about and what we share around the understanding of how life really works is something that's absolutely beyond the words. And that's why it feels like it's a secret, because we kind of say stuff like that and it's like, well, tell me what it is then. Tell me what changed for you. And so I will do the best that I can with the limitation of words that we have, to explain what it was that Deb talked to me about and what I see now. So it was a very simple understanding of how life actually works, and yet the depths that we can go to with that are just beyond anything. So it was, for me particularly, it was around how our experience is created, which for me, I put that very simply, and it's thought. Thought creates our experience. So whatever thoughts are going on in our head is the experience that we'll have. And for 2 or 3 years for me, I was having a lot of thoughts around, I'm entirely responsible for everyone, I'm not good enough, I make mistakes, no one actually likes me, those kinds of thoughts. And as you can probably imagine, those kinds of thoughts create not a great experience. And I'm sure anyone that's watching now or afterwards will resonate with some of those thoughts. I have no doubt that as human beings we all get those kinds of thoughts. And so I was having conversations with Deb around thoughts, particularly that's where we started, was the fact that we have thoughts in our head and then we get the feeling that goes with them. And equally on the flip side, we get some amazing thoughts. Like we have, I have moments where I'm watching the sunset, or even when I'm just sitting at home reading a book, and I have the most beautiful feelings because I'm clearly having some beautiful thinking. And so that was hugely what we explored for a long time, was how thoughts create our experience. And I really started to see that I'd gotten lost in insecure thinking. I'd gotten lost in anxious thinking. I'd really believed that in order to be okay, everybody around me had to do certain things. They had to behave in certain ways. I had to have money in the bank. I had to have a boyfriend. I had to have, I had to achieve things at work. And we build up a story of what a good life looks like. We kind of have a tick list, or at least this is how I have relationship, money coming in, people think I'm wonderful, I dress right, I have a good hairstyle, and we have our tick list of, if I have these things, then I'm okay. And what came about through the conversations I had with Deb, and certainly the things that I see a lot more now, is that okayness comes first. We are okay. That is our innate state. We are naturally okay. We are naturally clear-minded, peaceful, joyful, happiness, all the things that we say we're looking for in life. That's already what and who we are. And then we have a story that tells us we're not. And then we have a story that takes us away from experiencing that. And that was massively what came out for me as I was having those conversations with Deb, and she was doing some online courses and things like that at the time. So I was in a really fortunate position that she was emailing me every day with like little drips of this conversation. And it just, every day she was reminding me, you're okay. Your security, your happiness, your peace, your love, that's already yours. And it just, I just started to see that everywhere I looked. Like Deb just kept inviting me, see that you're okay first, and then notice that you have stories that tell you you're not. And so we just explored that together a lot, and things just dropped away for me around all sorts of things. I'd seen how not only had I got into a mess around work and taken on lots of responsibility that wasn't mine, I'd also been hugely looking for my okayness and my happiness in relationships, and I'd gone out and created all sorts of unhealthy relationships because of that, because I was dependent and needy and insecure and and again, I'm sure people will resonate with that, because that, it seems to be something that human beings get lost in, insecurity. And so I just started to see massive things around kind of relationships and friendships and kind of romantic relationships. And then just relationships across the board shifted for me with my family. And my sister and I are extremely close. And that wasn't the case a few years ago, I can tell you. We just weren't. And she's my best friend now. And one of the things that hugely changed for me was with my partner. We've been together a long time. 16 years. And we definitely had an unhealthy relationship for a period of time in the middle of there somewhere. And that was coming from me believing that he had to behave a certain way for me to be okay. He had to turn up and do certain things. He had to say the right things. He had to behave in the right way. And that what I find really interesting about that now is how even those rules changed in my head. Like there were some days where he had to hold my hand so that I was okay, and other days he wasn't allowed to hold my hand. That wasn't right. So goodness knows how he was ever supposed to keep up with the rules when I didn't know them all. But they were the sorts of things that they're the things that have really dropped away for me, is that I can see now I start from a place of being okay, and then everything else follows. And I'm sure we do hold hands sometimes, and I'm sure we don't sometimes, and neither of those things are where my okayness comes from. And that has just...
Whoops, we seem to have seized up again. So that's just, while we wait for Bec to come back on again, that actually has been my experience. When I first came to this understanding, I had already trained as a sexual and relationship therapist and as a psychotherapist. And everyone I knew who trained in that way had unhappy relationships. And we were teaching, supposedly helping other people to have good relationships, And that's why I spent years searching for the secret of everything, the secret of how to have good relationships, and the secret to how, what relationships were really about, just what you're talking about, because I had one unhappy relationship after another, despite all my training. So please do carry on.
This is a prime example of the situation in the past that would have just had me in bits on the floor, because it would look like it's entirely my responsibility to make sure the internet works. Thank goodness I don't feel responsible for that anymore. So I'm not sure quite how much you caught about the relationship stuff, but the summary is I went from being a person that was needy and insecure and expected my boyfriend to read my mind and know what he had to do to make me feel okay, to someone who just knows that I'm okay no matter what, and then have the pleasure of a nice relationship 90-something% of the time. And that just, you can't put a price on that, really, can you? You can't, there's something incredible in being able to do that. So yeah, that's kind of, I guess, a summary of where I was, where I am now. And then I think the other things that I really wanted to talk about is what I see now around how life works, and what I share when I'm in front of somebody, whether it's a client, a group, a webinar like this, that for me seems to be the thing that's helpful. So what that would be for me, I think, is there's 3 really simple things that I share with people, and then I let the conversation roll out from there, because I say them and often I get people go, really, you sure? But it's this for me. So those 3 things for me are that nobody is broken. We are absolutely whole and complete as human beings. We come with everything that we need, no matter what it looks like and no matter what our stories tell us. We come with everything that we need in any given moment. We have everything that we could possibly need. So that's always my first point, and that floors a lot of people. Really? Because it's quite a bold statement, isn't it, to say we're not broken and we absolutely have everything we need. But I have seen that time and again over the last 5 years, for me and with other people. I've really seen how that's true. That stands up as truth to me. And I always say these things to people and then invite people to see that for themselves, because it's easy for me to sit and say it because I've seen it and I've experienced it. But my invitation is always, see where you can see that for you, because it's truth when you get that experience, when you have the experience of knowing you're not broken, knowing that you're whole and that you come with everything you need. When you have that experience for yourself, even if it's the tiniest of moments, once you've experienced that once, that's available. You know that's available for you. So that's always my first point. No one is broken. And then my second point, which I've alluded to a fair bit, I think, through my story, is that our experience and our reality is created by the power of thought. We are thinking creatures, and there's just no getting away from that. And you'll have had experiences in your own life. You can be out having the most amazing day, and suddenly the thought pops in your head, oh, I think I left the oven on, and that's it. You're there, aren't you? You're at home, your house is burning down, and at least that's where I go with it. I go from, I'm having the most amazing day and I'm out and about and loving life, and I've left the oven on, and by the time I get home my house will be gone. Because that is the power of thought, and that's how our experience comes to us moment to moment. It doesn't feel to me like we have huge amounts of control over that. A little bit like our breathing, it looks like we are being breathed, and occasionally you might spend 10 minutes having some time doing having a different pattern of breath, but it's not long before you've forgotten to control your breathing and you're just breathing again. And it looks the same to me with thought. We can spend a little bit of time maybe doing some meditation or concentrating on some positive thinking, those kinds of things, but it's not long before thought just carries on doing what it does. And we don't control that. And I wouldn't even suggest that you try, because it can be a thankless task. But what I notice around that is that the nature of thought is that it passes. We have a thought, like I might have the thought I've left the oven on, but 5 minutes later I can be thinking about the fact that I'm wading into the sea in my Wellington boots and life is amazing again. Because that's the nature of thought. It passes, and it's designed to pass. And it's designed to give us a full-on experience, and boy do we get that sometimes. So that's kind of my second point, and I think I'm going to come back and talk a bit more about that, because that was the most powerful one for me. And then the third thing that I always like to share with people is that we have innate wisdom, and that we have, I liken it to a sat nav in a car. I passed my driving test just over 2 years ago, and I rely a fair bit on my sat nav, particularly now I live in Devon with all sorts of windy country roads that you can't make head nor tail of. I rely a lot on my sat nav. And one of the things for me is knowing that I have a similar thing. I have my own satellite navigation system. Life guides me. And in any given moment, it will help me and guide me. Whatever's in front of me, I have this wisdom that tells me what's the right thing to do. And again, one of the things I noticed when I looked back on kind of what had gone on in my life was how that wisdom was there, just this quiet voice in the back going, Bec. And through those 2 or 3 years where things were really bad for me and I was extremely anxious and stressed, there was this voice that was saying, this isn't quite right. Something's off here. You need to do something differently here. And I heard that voice and I ignored it, because we're very good at doing that, aren't we? And much like with my sat nav, if I'm driving and it says turn left here and I think, no, I don't like the look of that road, I'll just keep driving and ignore my sat nav. And then it starts saying turn around where possible. And our wisdom does the same. You know, it says to us, this isn't quite right, something's off here, go in a different direction. No, I'm perfectly fine. That's my voice, that's me saying no, I'm perfectly fine here. And I keep going, and my wisdom just gets a bit louder and a bit louder sometimes. But what I've seen over the last couple of years is that wisdom is always available to me, and it's available to every single human being. We are all part of one system, and we all have that same wisdom that guides us, and we can override it and we do. But it has an amazing way of coming back and telling us what we need to know. And I see that in things like, for me, I get physical symptoms. If I'm ignoring my wisdom, I'll often get some sort of physical symptom, a headache or a tummy ache that literally takes me off my feet and says, enough's enough, you need to stop now. And we're incredibly well designed like that our wisdom has that way of bringing in what we need in order that we get what is the right thing for us and guiding us. And even when we override it, it will keep coming back. So that's always kind of my third point with people, as I share, you know, listen out for your wisdom, because I guarantee it's there. So they're my kind of 3 pointers that I always share with people.
You said that you were so stressed and you were getting more and more and more stressed, and eventually you ended up in a heap on the floor.
Yeah.
So that was more of an emotional heap that you were in. And
yes.
And quite often, so what I've noticed, and what I noticed a lot when I was doing general practice, when I was in medicine, and again, why I was looking for answers was because it was obvious to me that people were having both physical and emotional symptoms.
Yeah.
Sorry, I think the window cleaner's just arrived.
Oh, fantastic.
People were
I'm sure there's a metaphor in there.
Yeah, people were having physical and emotional symptoms and for example, there was when I was in general practice, before I knew anything about any of this, there was a girl in the village who went away to university and had a psychotic breakdown. She was away at university for 1 term and was under so much pressure that she had a psychotic breakdown. And when she came back, and I had a chance to talk to her, and I said, look, you know, this is just what happens when we when we listen to all that. This is before I knew this stuff, right? When we listen to all this thinking and we get so, and we put all this pressure on ourselves by listening and by believing all of this thinking, eventually either our body, like you said, or our mind is going to say, that's enough. And that's what it did. It said, right, that's enough. You're not doing this anymore. Let's get out of here and take you to somewhere else. And she said, oh, it did. It took me to this lovely place. There were bunny rabbits. And but when she understood that that's all it was, and that she didn't have to take any notice of these labels that people had put on her, you know, because the first time it happened, she was admitted to a psychiatric hospital and they told her she was schizophrenic and they put her on all sorts of medications and stuff. And her parents were not happy about that. So they brought her home. And luckily she had my GP trainee at the time, who believed that everything had an underlying emotional psychological cause, even though they didn't understand this understanding. So that's why I ended up talking to her about how her mind was just helping her to listen to her wisdom, as you said. So so it can be psychological symptoms and it can be physical symptoms. And here's the window cleaner.
There's your window cleaner. That's a perfect metaphor for having a clear mind, isn't it? Brilliant, I love it. Well, he can.
Does he know he's on Facebook Live?
Brilliant. Yeah. So that's
sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, that's a really nice point you made about, because for me particularly, I find if I'm ignoring my wisdom, it ends up in some sort of physical symptom. But without doubt, because we're all human, and we all have, the physical, the emotional, all of that can come at different times. And one of the things I've been seeing a lot recently is where we've got the emotional stuff, the kind of feelings that we get are telling us when we're out of balance. So there's this kind of space of balance in the middle here. And if we're having feelings that, let's say they're, really anxious or really stressed or really extremely ecstatic and happy, they're telling us we've moved away from this place of balance. They're telling us that we are believing our thinking to be true, and we've moved away from this space where we know we're not broken, where we know the essence of who we are is the energy of life, is this universal connection that we have. Feelings are telling us how far away from that truth we are, how far away from that space in the middle we have gone. And when we misunderstand that, what I see happening with stuff like kind of psychiatry and those kinds of things is that people have misunderstood what those feelings are telling you. And it's a really, really simple feedback system. They're simply telling you how far away from that space of balance you are. And then we misunderstand, right, what they're telling me is my partner needs to do this, my job isn't paying me enough, I've got too many things going on. They're telling us stuff that's going on in the world, and that's a complete misunderstanding. And as soon as we come back to understanding that they're just telling us how far away from balance we've gone, we're on a pendulum and we've gone one way or the other. We've either taken on too much responsibility, which is exactly what I did, or not enough responsibility, because we are here to have a human experience. And if we go too far the other way and become almost uninterested in life and not kind of stepping up and living a life, then we've gone too far the other way, and we're also out of balance, because we're here to have the experience of being human whilst knowing that there's a deeper truth about who we are.
The biggest thing for me when I first came to this understanding was sort of what you've just said, that feelings don't mean what I thought they meant. So I had always thought, and I'd always taught my clients and so on, that if we had uncomfortable feelings, it meant that something was wrong and we needed to do something about it. And it meant that something was wrong on the outside, not that we were off balance inside. It meant something's wrong, like you said, oh, this relationship's not right, or I shouldn't be here, or so that's what I had learned. When I discovered that my feelings just meant, if I'm feeling angry, it just means I'm having an angry thought.
Yeah.
Ooh, okay. Or not just that I'm having an angry thought, but I'm actually taking that thought seriously. And there's nothing, that was the second thing, because the second thing I did when I got out of psychotherapy was I went into NLP training and hypnotherapy and so on, and all of those things, which were about then trying to change the thoughts. So they knew, it was about the thought, but they were about, oh, well, let's change this thought then. And it isn't even about that. So like you said, although thoughts pass, and all thoughts are going to pass, so we don't have to do anything because they will pass. But at the same time, that also gives you it might give people the impression that they're waiting for it to pass, rather than we don't have to wait for it to pass, it'll just pass. And in this moment, we are having an experience of being human, and there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with what's going on now, even if we're feeling angry or sad or whatever we happen to be feeling in this moment. We're not waiting for the next feeling to come along. We're enjoying what's going on now, even if it seems uncomfortable.
Yeah, and that for me, like what I see around that is the whole, when we understand what our feelings are telling us, I use a lot of car metaphors, I'm not entirely sure why, but they seem to work. If we misunderstand what a feeling tells us, it's a bit like my petrol light coming on in my car and me going and filling up Deb's car with petrol. That's not going to help my car, because the petrol light is talking about my car. And that's the same with our feelings. Our feelings aren't telling me, that my partner's doing something wrong, or that Anne's doing something wrong, or that Deb's doing something wrong. They're not, feelings aren't telling me that. That's a complete misunderstanding. And when we see what feelings are actually telling us that we've got a particular type of thinking and the quality of our thinking in that moment and how seriously we're taking it, when we remember that, what I notice happens for me then is that wisdom I talked about comes into play. And that wisdom gives me something. It either says, sit with it, or it says, you know, go out and play. 101 billion options potentially can come to me in that moment. And it's personal to me. That wisdom is personal to me. So when I'm lost in a feeling and I sit with it and kind of see, okay, so I understand what feelings are telling me, then my wisdom brings what's the right thing for me to do with that. And there's all sorts of different things. Sometimes it is to try and think something positive. Sometimes it is to try and meditate. Sometimes it is to just wait for it to pass. And sometimes it's to, you know, make a cup of tea, have a webinar with Anne and see what comes out of it. You know, there's all sorts of things. But I notice that that wisdom gives me the next step. It guides me on what to do. As soon as I see that my feeling is not telling me about something outside of me, then wisdom goes, why don't you do this? Or why don't you do that? Why don't you just stay with it? Why don't you sit? And I'm never saying to somebody, take my wisdom, because I know you have your own wisdom. I know that you are being guided what's right for you. And when I'm working one-to-one with a client, I will always kind of say to them, what feels right to you when that happens? What is it that, you know, and wait for that to come, because it will. Wisdom is always there. And I had a conversation with a client a few weeks ago. It's a really simple situation. He'd had a little falling out with his brother. And I was just talking to him about, when I fall out with my sister, I have wisdom that tells me what to do with that. Your wisdom will tell you what to do. I'm not going to sit here and give you advice on that, because that will be my wisdom. And your wisdom will be personal for you. And the next time I saw him, he said, I knew what to do. The next day, it was the anniversary of our mum's death. I messaged him, we're all good. There it was. That wouldn't have occurred to me to do for him. It wouldn't have occurred to me it was the anniversary of his mum's death. I don't think I even knew that. And his wisdom brought that to him. Oh, today's the right day to message my brother and move forward with this. And I can't give people advice in that way, because I can see that their wisdom will give that to them when they need it. And that, for me, makes it so much fun to have this conversation, because I, like, what used to be my life was taking on the responsibility of everybody. And now my life is knowing I'm not responsible and pointing people to that. And it's just polar opposites. It's incredible. And that, for me, I think that's why I call this stress less, love more, because I don't need to take on the stress of, I'm responsible for whether Anne thinks this is a good webinar. I'm responsible for how many people turn up on the webinar. I'm responsible for whether my partner enjoyed his toast and coffee this morning. I'm responsible. I don't need to do that. And not doing that, that's where the stress less bit comes in. And the love more part, for me, that was massively around the huge insights that I had around kind of insecurity and self-love. And I don't know if you've shared the booklet that we did as like a free gift for this webinar, but you've got a copy of it, I think, haven't you, Anne? So if anybody wants it.
Absolutely. I haven't yet, but I will. Yes.
Yeah, so we wrote a booklet, I think it's been around a while. We updated it a little bit for this particularly, but it's 6 lessons of self-love. And that was, I think, my first really big insight. The first thing that really changed for me was seeing that, because I understand how life really works and the truth of who I am, a natural byproduct of that is to be in love with myself. And that doesn't come from a kind of arrogant place. It doesn't come from that kind of cocky place that you sometimes meet people that are arrogant about who they are. It's a genuine knowing of the truth of who I am and how this really works, and that kind of essence of life that runs through all of us, that connects all of us. And when I really see that, when I really see the creative essence of the universe running through me, running through you, running through everybody, what is not to love? that is love. And that was the insights I was having when I first kind of came to this conversation. And so that, for me, is why it became stress less and love more, because I don't take on that responsibility, and yet I love me and everybody around me. And from that space of love, I mean, probably my output in terms of work productivity and life productivity is 100,000% more than it was 3 years ago, and yet my to-do list is about this big comparative to reams and reams of to-do lists before, and my stress level is, you know, from that big to virtually, you know, I have a little bit of stress because I think that's par for the course as human beings, and that's fun. It's a fun level of stress, if you like. And I think we get confused that the more stress we have, the more productive we'll be, and it's the absolute opposite.
Well, you've talked about you and your relationship, and your relationship is still going. How has your partner had to learn this understanding, these principles too, to make your relationship okay?
Great question. Great question. He's upstairs at the moment. I don't think he's listening in, so I can say anything I like. Okay, so I would say, I mean, he hasn't, is the straightforward answer. He has not learnt this understanding. He could probably reel off a few things that I, you know, might term, these are the principles I talk about. He could probably reel those off, because you'd struggle to be around me, my auntie and my sister and our little gang in North Devon here without hearing something. But he has never sat down in a workshop with us. He's never gone to a meetup. He's never watched, he may have watched 1 or 2 little webinars. He's never been to a conference, a retreat. We've never sat down and said, right, I'm going to tell you about these principles that underpin life, and you have to know them for us to be in a relationship. That's never happened. We have conversations, because this is a lot of what I talk about, so it just happens naturally. But that isn't something that's happened in terms of, like, I think in kind of relationships and stuff where people officially go for relationship counselling or that kind of thing, both parties have to be involved, and that it's not been at all like that. What has happened is that I have seen life differently, and our relationship has changed. And what I've kind of noticed around that is that hugely I was turning up in that relationship with conditions and demands and insecurity, rules that he didn't even understand. And with all of that that's dropped away, it's given me a space to be myself, it's given him a space to be himself, and it's given us the space to be ourselves together. And that's all that's changed. One tiny little thing in me shifted, and the whole relationship shifted. So yeah, great question. And the simple answer is no, he's never had to sit and listen to the principles in order for our relationship to change. Which I know for a lot of people, that's the thing. You know, I know even if it's a work relationship or anything like that, well, everybody else at work needs to know this. Nope. That was another thing that changed me. When I left the job that I was in, that I was talking about, where I had my meltdown, I went and worked in an office, just a sort of officey admin job in Coventry. And for maybe about a year or so, it was really good. I was in a really good space. And then I did have a bit of a blip, and I had stress, you know, back in that stress. It was never as bad, but it felt like it for a while. Oh, it's that stress again. Oh, I'm repeating patterns. People need to be different. Everybody around me needs to know the principles. And I had maybe 1 or 2 conversations with Deb, and oh no, I've gotten lost again. I've forgotten what my feelings are telling me. I've forgotten the truth of who I am. That, you know, a few conversations. And one of the reasons I do webinars like this and do the work that I do is because I see the difference it makes to have this kind of conversation regularly, to remind ourselves, because we do forget. I forget. I think my feelings are telling me something outside of me sometimes, and then I'm reminded and things shift again. So yeah, even whether it's a personal relationship, a work relationship, anything at all, when you see something different, everything changes.
What that reminds me of is I see it like having a human experience is like putting on a virtual reality headset. So the human body and the human mind are like a virtual reality headset, mindset, body set.
Yeah.
It's no wonder we forget. It's no wonder we forget, because it's so convincing. It's so convincing that this is real. And yet who we really are is, like you said, the wisdom that comes through, the wisdom that's always there in the background, that's guiding us and saying, guiding us, even by giving us physical symptoms or emotional symptoms in the body mindset, to remind us who we really are. Yeah.
We always kind of talk about it as an invitation to see again the truth of who we are. I like that metaphor of it being a virtual reality. That's really good, because it is, and it's so convincing. And I liken it to go into a film at the cinema. If you go in and watch a film at the cinema, and through the kind of 2 hours you're not falling in love with the characters, scared of the the bad guys or whatever it might be, if you're not in that film, you're going to walk out and think, well, that was a waste of my £10 cinema ticket. We go to watch films because we want to get lost in that story. We want the experience. I'm there going, chase her to the airport, tell her you love her, or don't go into the woods alone at night. I'm there in that story with them, and that's the experience I've paid for. That's what I want when I buy my cinema ticket and my popcorn. I want to go in there and be in that story. And if thought isn't doing that for me, it's not doing its job. To all intents and purposes, I want this experience of life. And sometimes that experience for a while feels like the worst experience I could possibly have. And then other times it's the most amazing experience I could possibly have. And I want that, when I sit down and when I'm quiet for a minute, that is what I want. I want the human experience. And the beautiful part of that is knowing that beyond the human experience, there's a deeper truth about who we are. That means when those human experiences are happening and I'm getting a bit lost, there's something in me that reminds me and points me back. This is just your human experience happening. This is the human experience playing out. And beyond that, you are perfectly okay. Which leads me nicely. Oh, were you going to say something?
I was just going to say, isn't it funny that that when we go to the cinema, we deliberately go to films that are really scary and that make us feel really scared, or that make us cry, or that we actually want to feel scared. But when we have those experiences in the human life, we're like, oh, I shouldn't be feeling that. I shouldn't be feeling
I don't want this. Yeah. Definitely. And so what I was going to go to next was how that kind of leads in quite nicely to one of the things I think, the love more part of what we kind of got the title. For me, a huge part of that is how much fun I have with life. You and I first met, the very first conversation we had must have been nearly a year ago, because it was the week I moved to Devon to work with Deb. And you were doing a series of Facebook Lives, and I saw that was happening, and I dived in. And can we come and do a Facebook Live with you? Yeah. Who are these crazy people? What do they want to do a Facebook Live with me for? And we just had a really amazing conversation. And I think since then, you often comment on how much fun we're having and what craziness we're getting up to, and that we're always drinking tea and eating cake, because that is a massive part of what we do. Is we're there kind of saying, this is how life really works. And that means you can go out and have an amazing amount of fun with it. Because if we're here to have a human experience, a part of that experience should be fun. It should be daring to be you. And the name of our business is Dare to Be You on Purpose, because we're inviting people to go out and be who you are, live life. Like, it's great to have these conversations, and I love them. And the reason I love them is because then I can go out and have an amazing life. I can go out and, whether that's drinking tea and eating cake, or whether it's doing skydives or anything in between. Because the invitation is to live life, is to have loads of fun. And we do. And I think in some of the stuff we do, some of our Facebook Lives and events that we put on and stuff, that comes across, because that is part and parcel of what we're sharing here. Is that life is for living. There's no point sitting and having these conversations all day, every day, and not actually living a life, So that was, for me, part of the love more, is having fun, loving your life, doing what looks like is yours to do.
And while Bec seized up a moment, I'll just say that if you're interested in doing any of the discussing more with Bec or with Debs or going on any of their programs or any of their retreats, then there will be links at thesecretofeverything.com under the headings of all the speakers. There are links to their websites and to all the things that you can do with them. So go to the secretofeverything.com and sign up. Not sign up, go to the page with those. And I think Bec will be coming back now. She's back now. I've just been saying, I just used that as an advert break to say where they could find you from, by going through the secretofeverything.com to your bio page and finding the links to where to do the things with you if they want to do that.
Yeah, and I mean we're not shy, me and Deb, and when you do Deb's webinar, you'll see we're not shy. We'll be friends with anyone. We're on Facebook a lot. Facebook's our main platform, but we have a website and we have Facebook groups and stuff. I'm on Facebook as Bec Sheffield, not Becky Sheffield. So yeah, you can come and find us and say hello. I'll always chat to pretty much anyone, me. So yeah, you're welcome to connect. And I think all our information's on the Secret of Everything website too. So do find out what we're up to, and it's always a good excuse if you want a little beach trip to come and visit us in Devon. Yeah, so I don't know where I got up to in the last whether there was
no, I was going to ask you, I was while that we come back to that, one of the things that I was going to ask you about was, you said at the beginning that you spent all those years in and around the church, and
yes,
and that you then came out of that, but you didn't say any more about, so how are you with that now? Is that anything to do with this? Is the church anything to do with this? How do you feel about the church now? Where's that? Is that?
That's there's such good timing around that question, because so it's about 5 years since I left the church community that I was a part of. And at the time when I left, part of the reason I left was because I worked with the church. I'd gotten myself into an unhealthy relationship with somebody in the church, and all of that kind of blew up in one go. My job, my relationship, and I lost sight of who I was in relation to God and my faith. So all of those things came crashing down at the same time. And so I just stopped attending church, and I don't attend church now as like a regular thing at all. But what I see around that is that for me, truth is everywhere. Truth is in everything, because we are truth in form. Truth is already inside of us. And so what I see now is the church that I belong to, they were talking about truth the same as I do, the same as Anne does, the same as anyone in these webinars will be doing. And the church community, for me, that was just their particular way of sharing that truth. And all that happened for me was I got lost in my own insecurities and my own confusion around what that meant for me. And I don't go to church now simply because it looks to me like God is everywhere and I glorify God in every single moment of my life. How can I not? Because we are God in form. We are God manifest, if you like. And so I don't go to church particularly now, but interestingly, I went last week for a funeral for somebody that I knew when I was at church. And it was the first time I'd been back in the church building since I left 5 years ago. And it was an incredible experience for me. The people that I was there with were just so welcoming. And I stood up and sang hymns that I haven't sang for 5 years. I bowed my head in prayer, which I haven't done for 5 years. And it was such a beautiful experience, because I just felt the truth of what was being said in that church building. I really felt it in a way that I don't think I had when I was there before. So it was a really good, timely question, because I still have absolute faith that there is something bigger going on here in life than just the kind of little human Becky that you see on the screen. And I'm absolutely sure of that. But for me, it doesn't come for me as needing to attend church in that way anymore. It just comes to me as living my life and turning up each day, being the best me I can be, and having this amazing experience that we've been talking about. Does that answer the question?
It does. What I found so hopeful, because that's usually the answer that I get when I ask people who do attend church of some sort, but people get a bit confused sometimes when they come to this understanding that it may be about religion, or it may be, but actually the people, what's really hopeful is that it's actually about everyone, and there is not one religion or one, it's about it fits into every religion. So there are lots of people from the Jewish community, lots of people from Islam, there's lots of people from all religions that have this same understanding, like you said, that God is everywhere. So how can it be a different God for different people? And it's just, it makes, what I like about it is that a part of the secret of everything is that it is for everyone, for everything, and that we can be one, and we can have peace, and we can save the world. You know, it's a way of understanding everyone. Yeah.
And I think I can see, when we talked about wisdom earlier, for the people that when I was at the funeral last week, for the people that turn up to church 2 or 3 times a week and meet together and have the particular things they do, that's their wisdom telling them, for me right now, being in church and sharing this in this way is the right thing for me. And I think when I look back, I don't have any regrets about being a part of a church community for as long as I was. I absolutely loved it. And it really made sense to me in the time. And it was of its time, and that's not where I'm at now. And I'm totally good with that. And I am full of love and respect for the people that attend whatever, whether it's a church, a mosque, any synagogue, anything. If that is where your wisdom takes you right now, that is perfect. And I have complete and utter love and respect for that. And it was just so beautiful to be back there last week from the perspective of how much has changed for me over the last 5 years, and to just meet with people that are full of love in their way, in their space, in their church. That was amazing to me. I'm very accessible, so if you have questions, you can always come back to me afterwards. And can't guarantee I'll know the answer.
I discovered that we can't go live on Facebook and on YouTube at the same time, so I'm doing a bit of both.
Alternating.
But
Brilliant.
this will definitely get published to YouTube at some stage. I think that's perfect. I think you've said it's just been lovely. It's been a lovely feeling, and that's really what I like about this. Like you said, having these conversations reminds you of what it's really about, and it's just getting in. Just getting into the feeling of it, and really
that feeling is telling us that we are in that space of knowing the truth of who we are, and that's all I ever want to do with people, is point them back there.
Lovely. So thanks very much, Bec.
Thank you, Anne. That's been brilliant.
And I'm sure I'll be seeing you again very soon.
I'm sure you will.
Thanks again. Bye then.
Thanks, Anne. Bye.
Bye everyone.